If there's anything we love here at What Culture beyond the obvious, it's a good reappraisal. Films, even the truly legendary ones, can take years to find their people and be recognized as the masterpieces they truly are. Just look at John Carpenter's filmography post-Halloween. Dude followed that film up with several masterpieces, including The Thing, which today is acknowledged as one of the greatest films ever made, and both that and most of the others were critically panned. There is genuinely no justice in this world that man dropped both Prince of Darkness and In the Mouth of Madness, only for both to be greeted with a shrug, even if they're now basically cult favorites today. But while plenty of these reappraisals lead to a neat consensus, that isn't always the case. Whether it's folks appreciating the vulgar auteurism of Michael Bay, or reclaiming a slice of childhood nostalgia as good, actually, see the Star Wars prequels, there's always going to be a bit of pushback, even with considered attempts at re-evaluation. And I get it, mostly. Not every panned film is a secret masterpiece. Equally though, I find this attitude of not everything from your childhood needs to be reappraised both dismissive and slightly tedious. Like, yeah, I think it's a bit silly for people to log online and say that the Mike Myers Cat in the Hat is good, or that Tim Burton's Charlie and the Chocolate Factory had the sauce, but apart from folks being entitled to their own opinions, scary as they may be, there's plenty of stuff from the zillennial childhood canon that maybe isn't as widely appreciated as it should be. For me, if any film from the early 2000s typifies that the most, then it has to be 2002's Scooby-Doo. Written by James Gunn and directed by Raja Gosnell, Scooby-Doo and its 2004 sequel, Scooby-Doo 2: Monsters Unleashed, might be two of the most brilliant and bizarre kids' movies ever made. Boasting an immaculate cast led by Matthew Lillard, Freddie Prinze Jr., Sarah Michelle Gellar, and Linda Cardellini, an affectionate blend of meta-parody and character-driven drama, and somehow an early 2000s CGI animal that isn't cursed. Both films performed solidly at the box office, but were mostly panned by critics, who saw them less as a Scooby Snack worth savouring, and more like the works of Scooby-Dum. Sorry, Scooby-Dum, I didn't mean for you to catch strays when I was writing this, but it just kind of worked out that way. Now, naturally, as the kids who grew up with these films have grown into well-adjusted adults, myself hopefully included, the reputation of these films has turned steadily over time, particularly within the Scooby fandom. I'll get to that latter aspect in a bit because I think it's what cements these films as genuinely great adaptations, but I also want to mention how the overall discussion of the two Scooby movies more recently has hinged on their mythic risque elements, egged on, of course, by Gunn's ascension to superstar director status post Guardians of the Galaxy. If you're familiar with the development of these films, then you'll probably be aware that the eventual PG versions we got were not what was originally intended. In fact, the very first Scooby-Doo film was meant to be PG-13. More meta, more crude, and more cynical. But contrary to the belief that it's a shame that this initial vision never came to fruition, I actually kind of think this is a case of studio tampering and ratings board ping-pong saving the day. Yep, I know, I'm scared too, but speaking as someone who grew up with these films and the Scooby golden age they comprised, I genuinely cannot imagine anything worse than an adult-oriented piece of Scooby media. Like, could you imagine if someone sat down and developed a Scooby-Doo show where they made the Shaggy Stoner thing explicit and actual brutal murders and stuff happened and swearing? That would be absolutely diabolical. But I digress. The point I'm trying to make here is that Scooby-Doo should be for kids, and Gosnell's films, while filled with enough risque moments to awaken something primal within me like the Hex Girls did in Scooby-Doo and the Witch's Ghost, I love that gal. Pulled off that balancing act really well, sidestepping the cynicism of a more overt parody and instead working as the smart, affectionately articulated send-ups of the original cartoon, with plenty of fart jokes along the way. And it all arguably came together in the edit, becoming probably the crown jewel in the late 90s to mid-2000s golden period of the franchise, which started with Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island and ended probably with the finale of What's New Scooby-Doo in 2006. And if you want a solid testament to the legacy of these films, when original Shaggy voice actor Casey Kasem retired from the part a few years later, Matthew Lillard ended up replacing him in most shows and films after that point. That's really cool. Oh, and by the way, simple plan, banger life-altering theme you cooked up for What's New Scooby-Doo, so thank you for that, and also for contributing to both of the film's soundtracks, which get way more airtime on my Spotify playlist than I should probably be open to admitting. But all of this could have been completely different. Had things gone according to plan, we'd have had a Scooby-Don't rather than a Scooby-Doo. Please do not click off this video because of my terrible puns. I just can't help myself, okay? When James Gunn boarded the Scooby-Doo project in the early 2000s, the original plan, as previously mentioned, was for it to be a meta, self-aware, and teen-skewing parody of the Hanna-Barbera cartoon. This MO extended to the casting of key roles, with the principal cast all being pulled from the creme de la creme of 90s horror cinema. Matthew Lillard from Scream, Freddie Prinze Jr. and Sarah Michelle Gellar from I Know What You Did Last Summer, and the latter also from Scream 2, and Linda Cardellini from, well, I guess she had Strangeland? The film's parody credentials are baked in visually from that aspect alone, but the shooting script went way further, as detailed in a Scoob retrospective by Lou McGregor for No But Listen published in 2023. Referencing a Facebook post made by James Gunn in 2017, the original plan for Scooby was, in Gunn's own words, quote-unquote edgier, which was changed when the studio intervened. Now, shockingly, Gunn also confirmed long-standing rumors of a lost R-rated cut, which stemmed from a joke being misconstrued by the MPAA as a reference to oral sex. Among the goodies included in this fabled original version of the film was more cleavage, which would have probably blown Roger Ebert's mind given most of his review is devoted to the topic in true on-brand Ebert fashion, more explicit references to Shaggy stonerisms, riffs on Fred and Daphne having an insecure friends with benefits relationship, and also an actual depiction of Velma as a lesbian, with her even sharing a kiss with Daphne. Pretty ahead of the curve for the early 2000s, but not necessarily in a positive representation kind of way like we've grown used to in recent years. Now, without seeing the original cut in question, it's hard to tell if they were using this for just another punchline, but given the overall spirit and direction of the other cut gags, which ostensibly included Daphne joking that Fred looked gay for wearing an ascot, I'm gonna go ahead and assume that the depiction wasn't particularly cash money. Beyond the raunchy humor and questionable early 2000s jokes though, Scooby-Doo was also originally gonna be Scooby-Doomier. While the final cut feels of a piece with Zombie Island and that it uses actual real-life monsters to take the gang out of their comfort zones, and includes maybe some slightly intense imagery for younger audiences, it was meant to go further. Ultimately nixed by test screenings, the demons in the film were meant to suck out the souls of their victims rather than their protoplasm, and earlier drafts of the script were completely scrappy devoid, with a different demon monster intended to be the ultimate antagonist. Ultimately, while I understand the appeal today of people seeking out these lost cuts and early drafts, there's something fundamentally incompatible for me about Scooby and that kind of tongue-in-cheek approach. I don't know, it just feels kind of mean. Like, Scooby-Doo should be for kids, and that's ultimately what the finished movie became, albeit one that finally navigated the line to keep it entertaining for an adult audience. Honestly, it's kind of an incredible achievement in editing and directorial stewardship, because so much of that initial vision made it through to the shoot, and then was totally recalibrated into something funnier, smarter, and as McGregor also concludes in their aforementioned piece, more celebratory of Scooby overall. Look, it's easy to roll your eyes at something blatantly corny and play to internet humor, but to thread that needle in a way that preserves and interrogates the series' identity, that's much harder, and is something the actual released film and its sequel, Monsters Unleashed, do quite superbly. Like, you've got the introspective elements that make fun of the tropes themselves, but in the process, these moves eke out actual character arcs for Mystery Inc. Daphne confronts her damsel in distress status, Fred's narcissism is played up until he learns to put his ego aside and delegate properly, Velma grows in confidence while also coming to accept her friends for who they are, and Shaggy and Scoob realize the strengths they bring to the team instead of contorting themselves into something that they actually aren't. Also, on a pure vibes level, it is pure 2000s kitsch, and I love all of it. Bleach tips, Sugar Ray on the soundtrack, vibes do not get much better than that. And yeah, of course nostalgia plays into all of this. I've no doubt in my mind that one of the reasons I really enjoy these films is that I grew up with them, and they take me right back to those mornings spent planted in front of the TV watching Boomerang. But beyond the happy memories ameliorating any of the janky elements like dodgy CGI, I think overall these are still solid, entertaining kids films that, as an adult, I can appreciate even more for the way in which they came together. And to be clear, it's not that I can't envision a tongue-in-cheek, more adult Scooby-Doo. In the right context, like a bit in Robot Chicken or some kind of 10-second TikTok, it can obviously be hilarious. But we're talking about a flagship film for a children's franchise. It should always have been for kids. The ironic dichotomy here, of course, is that the initial tracks Gunn placed the film on are what enabled it to be a more considered adaptation. It works on a broad level because the intent to subvert automatically engendered an introspective glint to the narrative. So, without edgy Scoob, we wouldn't have the versatile, legacy-oriented film we ended up getting. It essentially succeeds by having its cake and eating it, which is very on brand for Scoob if you think about it. In no way is it high art like some of the other kid media I grew up with, like Batman the Animated Series or Sam Raimi's Spider-Man, but neither were the original Scooby cartoons. To quote that oft-clipped cast interview with Freddie Prinze Jr., "It was a talking dog, you know what I mean?" With that said, Scooby has always been this warm, comforting blanket to me. A simple, goofy pleasure that brought spooky goodness to our TV screens in a weirdly, generationally transcendental way. The limits were always apparent, even as a kid, but those cartoons are so earnest in their own silliness that I could never close my heart to them, and the same goes for the film. It's not revolutionary, it is still a corporate early aughts package with a CG dog, a licensed soundtrack, a very good licensed soundtrack mind, and more fart jokes than you can possibly sniff at. But it embodies all those happy little feelings I have about Scooby in its own earnestly funny way, and that probably wouldn't have been the case had things gone according to plan. So thank you, unnamed studio people and ratings boards, for taming Scooby-Doo 2002. It feels weird to say thank you to either of those two things, but hey, this is the kind of sick, twisted world we live in. And I think that just about covers everything I have to say about Raja Gosnell's Scooby-Doo movies. Well, mostly everything, because I'd love to do a whole video breaking down why the scene in Monsters Unleashed where Shaggy and Scooby go undercover and dance to Sly and the Family Stone is one of the funniest things I've ever seen, but that would definitely be pushing my luck, Scoob. In any case, I hope you all enjoyed this look back at Scoob and the Gang's live-action adventures. If you did, it would be amazing if you could drop the video a like and subscribe so you don't miss another. Otherwise, this has been the 10,000 Volt Ghost known as Ewan Patterson. This was What Culture, and I'll hopefully catch you next time.
Like Scoob!